Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we have a new result for Divinez. This is one of the biggest tournaments since the release of set 1, and that is the Ultimate Vanguard Cup. The results just came in as of today. The event was today. So just going to go through all the results, some interesting things and how people have manipulated different decks, kind of how things have kind of changed from our initial perspective, and then I guess a few texts that made things a little bit interesting for this premiere event. If you guys need any coaching, my link is in the bottom right hand corner for my Metafy. Feel free to book a session and we can get started on your Spring Fest season. If you guys haven't already, click that subscribe button for all notifications on this channel. So the Ultimate Vanguard Cup is essentially an event in Tokyo, and we have the top 16. So this is a pretty big event, and cutting to top 16, we have majority of the top 16 being Shiranui, so 5 Shiranui taking up 31% of the top 16 distribution. And then it seems like from the Divinez set 1, Varga and Rezael are big players from that set, and kind of showing that, you know, straight out of the booster set, they have made such a big impact. And then 2 Luards, and then pretty much one-offs of everything else, so Youthberg, Direful Dolls, and Magnolia. I think these 3 outlier decks, well, not really outlier, but like less represented decks, are actually very good. More so the Direful Dolls and the Magnolia. I've been playing with Direful Dolls a lot. I think that deck is pretty stupid. But yeah, more onto that a little bit later. So just going to go through, I guess, the top 16, just going through some slight text that people have, I guess, accommodated to or adjusted to. So the first place was Shiranui, and funnily enough, the top 3 were all Shiranui, and then 4th place was Youthberg, which was quite interesting. So this Shiranui list, every Shiranui list runs the Shodoji Grade 2, being able to top 5 search for 2 Stealth Dragons, put 1 to Soul Core 1. This deck doesn't run the Stride Dragon, so it opts to run the Shiranui, which, you know, it kind of makes sense. The ditch for Stride, I guess, still serves the same role as the Dragon, but in this case, you're playing it for the name to be able to search it out using your Grade 2 Ride Line. This deck is pretty interesting, playing the new Cycle card to be able to essentially, you know, ditch draw on, like, during your ride deck, or if you place it on Guardian Circle, you can counterblast 1. Draw 1. This deck actually doesn't use a lot of counterblast other than your Grade 1 to be able to draw cards, so another way to draw cards is very welcome. But otherwise, everything else is kind of, you know, pretty staple. Dropping this guy I think used to be a staple at 4, dropping it to 3 to make space for the Cycler card. Playing for Shenri, for Yasuo? I call him Yasuo from League of Legends, yeah, so Yasuo. Playing for Yasuo is pretty standard, and I think it's a staple in Shiranui, especially if you're playing against the mirror. You know, being able to play Grade 2 game and not fall apart is very much needed. And I think with Shenri, you know, it's kind of annoying though, because people play around Shenri. So, you know, essentially 1 or less rear guards, or if you play in order, then the effect activates, right? And only under those circumstances will a game +5. So in English, obviously we don't have this promo, so yeah, more into that later. I will be making a comprehensive guide for Shiranui later. So yeah, I was explaining a little bit more about that. But otherwise, everything kind of stays the same. 1 Bracing Angel Ladder for the mirror, you know, 8 crits, pretty normal. So yeah, that's Shiranui list. Second one, this one I actually like a lot, and the reason being is that you're playing Esperadia. So why is this card so important is because a lot of decks now, first one is Prism, right? Prism is such a bad matchup for this deck. If you verse Prism or anything that clears your board and then chains it with a Bracing Angel Ladder, like, you just get absolutely destroyed, right? You're playing a 3-attack deck, your deck sucks, right? Esperadia helps that. And why is that? Is because your Grade 2s that restand require you to dominate a unit. Now, if you don't dominate, Esperadia at least then provides 5 attacks, right? Sure, you might get 4 attacks, whatever, right? You hit OT, you win, okay? But Esperadia, if you have this card in hand, you're able to essentially fish out for, you know, I guess cards to be able to push your opponent if they're trying to counterplay you, right? A lot of decks now, you know, if you're going into Springfest, you're going to be seeing Prism. Prism is horrible for this deck, like so bad, right? Esperadia really helps, and I wouldn't even be surprised if, like, in English, you take out Shenri and you put in the grade 1 for Nirvana that searches a grade 4. Like, that's just it, right? Like, it's just so hard, especially if decks try to counter you and, like, you're only attacking 3 times, like, you're not winning, right? Like, you're just not getting through their hand at all. Otherwise, everything else kind of stays the same. This player plays 2/2 of the effect heal, so I think this is the restand heal, and I think the restand heal is very effective in this metagame because Shunui is a big player, Varga is a big player. Anything that restands, right, you immediately just get like 25k shield, which is just so good. Otherwise, you know, everything else kind of stays the same. And yeah, that is a pretty interesting list, and I think this list is very, very good. But yeah, more on that in my comprehensive guide a little bit later on. Shunui does come out this week anyway, so yeah, they'll come out very, very soon. Third place, so this player played the Stride Dragon, or the grade 4 dragon. Essentially 15k shield if you reveal a grade 4, but you know, you don't obviously have a grade 4 to show, but more so just to ditch and draw, and then yeah, you know, place on rearguard +5, sure, it's a beta, like whatever. But otherwise, like, everything else just kind of stays the same. Playing 4 World Original heals instead of the 2/2 split. But otherwise, this is pretty stock standard, I think. Nothing more to say there. Then looking at the Youthberg list, this Youthberg list plays a pretty interesting, how should I say, ride line in comparison to the normal youth list. Playing this grade 1. Is this the Rezael grade 1? It's not the Rezael grade 1. I think this is the Luan grade 1, I think. Yeah, when it's written, you reveal 3 different grades from your hand, then you top 5, search for 1 card, grade 1 or lower, and call it. Otherwise, you call this to rearguard, which is pretty interesting. Like, I'm not too sure what the application of that is, because I guess you're trying to search for, like, your Sequanas, your bards you're ditching anyways. Yeah, that one's a really weird one. Haven't really seen that ride line play in Youthberg at all. And then, you know, everything else kind of stays the same. You still run your 2, you ride your 3, you salvage a card from your bin. Otherwise, everything else is kind of normal. The 1 Reedy, 1 Cat, and then playing Chalice, so not playing Angel Ladder, which is questionable, I think, because I think Angel Ladder in a deck that has or keeps a field is, like, very good into Shunui. So I'm not too sure about the Chalice, but then again, you know, this player came top 4. And running 3/1 of the restand heals, and I agree with this. I think that is very, very good. Yeah, very, very good. Cool. That is that. Then looking at the top 8. So this top 8 again, you know, Esperadia. So I think this is a good call for, you know, versing decks that, you know, try to deny you of domination, and if the deck doesn't, you know, deny you, then sure, whatever. But otherwise, playing the dragon in conjunction with Esperadia, and only 3 is Aswo. I think that is wrong. I think playing 4 is really good. Just being able to search out early is like too good. Like CB1, draw 1, keeping up the grade 2 game is pretty good. But then again, you know, if you're thinking you're playing into a lot of Divine set 1 decks, then you might not need to contest for First Stride. But then again, you know, the top 4, 3 of them were Shunui, so I don't know. Well, yeah, pretty cool. So yeah, that's that one. So this is where it gets a little bit interesting. So we covered Varga in the Giraful event, So just kind of seeing how this deck kind of changed. So this deck doesn't run the grade 3 that doesn't retire itself if it's in the front row. Opting to play 4 of the Cycler card, bumping up this grade 1 to 4. I think the initial list that we saw last week ran 2 of this, and I think people are starting to realize that this actually works as a rearguard booster as a 13k, and then opting to run Bernia. So this is the Gandiva grade 1, where after boost you can bind itself and draw 1. I think being able to just go through your deck, find your pieces is really good, especially if you find multiple of this. I think that's very, very valuable, and then just being able to, you know, churn through your deck, find what you need, find Chalice, find Persona Ride, find PGs. That's just really, really strong. So yeah, otherwise I think everything else is kind of normal. Maxing out on Boulder Axe Dragon, 4 of this busted grade 2, and then 4 of the Restander. I think that is pretty straightforward. Very, very cool Varga list. Now this is the list that I really wanted to talk about, and it is Dieful Dolls. I think this deck is pretty nuts, and I was like playing with it yesterday and I'm like, how the heck does this deck work? And then I finally realized, like, you know, how to chain attacks. This grade 2 is absolutely busted. I think being able to Energy Blast 3, bind itself, call a Dieful Doll that is not her or a different card name to rearguard is really strong. This grade 3 as well, being able to place on rearguard or Guardian Circle and putting one of your Dieful Dolls from your drop zone into your soul, being able to always have access to I call it the Elite 3 or the Big 3. So this, this, and this insane grade 1. Essentially, after boost, you can bind it, choose 2 of the cards in your drop zone with Dieful Doll in its name, and put it into soul. Like, this card itself is just so strong, because when you bind it, if you call it to Guardian Circle using your grade 3 skill, it becomes a 15k shield, but being able to set up your soul, that is just ridiculous. So those 3 absolute MVPs in this deck. And yeah, this deck, I think there's a lot of work that this deck can, I guess, well, there's a lot of things people can put into this deck to kind of make it work. I've been trying out a few different things, but yeah, I guess my finding is a little bit later. There is a few things in this deck that I absolutely agree on, but we'll talk about that in a sec. So playing the grade 0 Dieful Doll, pretty standard. You're essentially playing 4 of every single Dieful Doll. So this grade 1, if it's rode upon, check top 7 for 2 Dieful Dolls, put into soul. And then the rearguard skill obviously is after attacks or boost, if you have a grade 3 Dieful Doll Vanguard, well, if you have a grade 3 Dieful Doll Vanguard against +5, end of battle, bind it. So immediately a 10k shield on any of your opponent's attacks. This grade 2, pretty crazy. Essentially, if it's ridden upon by grade 3, you call it out. When it's placed on rearguard, you essentially put a Dieful Doll from your hand into soul, draw 1. This unit and your Vanguard gains +5. The +5 is actually very, very big, because your Vanguard is only 13k, it doesn't gain anything else, right? 13k, unless you Persona Ride a 23, 28 is a very annoying number. And I think, yeah, this grade 2 has a lot of utility to be able to kind of play through this deck. So maybe it's not Elite 3, maybe it's Elite 4. So this is like the 4th card that you call, right? Well, you chain this into the grade 2. Well, that grade 2 you put into soul, salvage your hand. The quality of cards in your hand is actually very, very good. Yeah, and then you play the Dieful Doll grade 3. This grade 3 is yeah, pretty interesting. Count +1. You call as many Dieful Dolls as the grade of your opponent's Vanguard to rearguard, and notice that it is not different card names. So you can call multiple of the same units, which is really good. And then essentially when this unit is attacked, you can choose one of your Dieful Dolls in your bind zone, call it to Guardian Circle, and gains +5. Essentially makes all of your Dieful Dolls 10k minimum shield other than the grade 3. Very, very strong. Note that this guy is a human, not a workeroid, so it doesn't actually work. So yeah, you have to call Divinez or Workaroid to the Guardian Circle. So the list plays 4 of this insane grade 3. Essentially, when it's placed on Rearguard or Guardian Circle, you place one of your Divinez from your drop zone into Soul. When it attacks, if you're grade 3 or greater, with Divinez in its name, you gain plus 10k power, and then at the end of battle you can bind it. Optionally, you can cast one and draw a card. The drawing a card isn't too much of an issue, but I guess if you commit it from hand, then you kind of want to replenish that card. So yeah, that's that. Play 3 Persona Rides, playing more of the Cycler card. Essentially, when you ditch it for Ride deck, or when you place it on Guardian Circle, you can cast one or Energy Blast 3 and draw a card. If you Persona Ride this turn, cast 1 or Energy Blast 3, Soul Charge 1. This unit gains boost and plus 5. The second skill is not too great. It's more so, you know, riding up to grade 3, not being able to, well, not needing to get rid of stuff, you know, from your hand to essentially keep up the hand size. I don't know if this is good in this deck or not. I find that sometimes this card can be a little bit clunky, but then again, you know, it is what it is. Play 3 more of that. This grade 2 is pretty crazy. So essentially, if you're when this unit attacks, you essentially, at the end of battle, Energy Blast 3, bind it, call a different card named Divinez Workaroid, Divinez to the Rearguard, and yeah, that's just it. So essentially, it's a 4 attack deck, unless you have double of this Spear Girl. Yeah, that's just it. And then she essentially gains plus 10k power, pretty much. Other requirements, but yeah, we'll speed run through this a little bit. I'll explain more about that when I make my comprehensive guide. The old Cycler card, again, being able to just ditch Soul Blast 1, draw a card. I guess the second bit is like pretty okay. Like if you Persona Ride, you can cast 1, call a card from your Soul to Rearguard, and then Soul Charge 1. So, you know, helpful. I explained this grade 1 already. Busted grade 1 at 4. 3-1 split of PGs, 1 cat, and this Almagestar really strong because you can put your Divinez triggers into Soul, bind it, and your Divinez triggers become essentially 20k shield, which is absolutely nuts. She's really good behind the Vanguard because your Vanguard is pretty weak, so being able to have an 18k booster is very welcome. Otherwise, you're playing 4 Divinez crits, which is a must. This deck opts to run draws. I don't know if draws is right or fronts is right. I think fronts is very impactful in terms of offense, because I think this deck does lack that a little bit. 2-2 split on heals, I think this is really good because you're playing the grade heal, playing against Shunui or Luard. It's, yeah, really, really strong. 4 more crits. Dark State's OT. This is okay. You can also play the red OT, I think. The red OT is pretty good. 1 Chalice, I really agree with this, because essentially the ladder is for Shunui, and if you're binding enough, so if you're binding like, you know, 8 cards or whatever, or enough cards, essentially the only unit that they're dominating is your grade 1 Almagestar, and that's hitting for like what? 8 plus 4, 12, 12 plus 5, 17. 17, it's a 10k shield. So essentially you're just, you know, guarding with your grade 2 that binds itself, or like guarding with like another grade 2, or like, I don't know, something else that is like 10k. Like maybe like your grade 1, right? Yeah, maybe that. Cool, so that's that. And yeah, that's pretty much the Divinez deck. Very, very cool. And then again, another Rezael deck. This one runs this grade 3, essentially a 28k beater if you called an effect, well, called a Rearguard by an effect, I think by Rezael, or if you have a Rezael Vanguard, yeah. Essentially 28k beater, but otherwise everything else is kind of normal. Selengo, very, very busted card. Hopefully this comes out in English very, very soon. And then 4 of the Regalia order, or yeah, Genesis Angelica order. But otherwise, yeah, nothing has really changed for this deck from the initial build. Then just skimming through the top 16. This one opted to run Sages instead of the 28k. But otherwise, everything else is pretty normal. Playing the Spiral Cutie to be able to just go through your deck. Otherwise, not really opting to run much more of anything else. Pretty stable build, I think. And then this one runs... This one is like super max, right? Like SP Wingle Brave, 4 secrets of Rezael. Everything is like FFR or FR. Deluxe Championship PG. I'm guessing this would be a foil. And like Deluxe OT. FFR Cat. Like illustration rare triggers. Like this is pretty max. But this is pretty interesting. Energy Blast 2 to play this card. Choose 2 of your units. Give the following ability, I think. Yeah, pick 2 of your units. Gains 10k power during the battle that this unit boosted. If your unit has 5 or more cards, -1 or 1 less, draw 1. Anyways, interesting order selection, I think. I think I prefer just having this to be able to just draw. But yeah, interesting order. Otherwise, everything else is kind of normal. We've gone through the Shiranui enough. This deck doesn't really have too much difference from everything else. Magnolia. So I think this deck is a bit different from the Magnolia that we saw previously. So this one focuses more on Elder. This card is essentially that Glow Dragon except for Elder. Essentially Cavos 1, Solos 1. For every 2 grades of your Vanguard, call a card from your drop zone, or grade 3 or lower. And then it essentially gains +5 for every 2 grades of your Vanguard. So immediately becomes 20. Plus Elders is 25, so very strong. Otherwise, everything else is kind of normal, as what we saw before. You play a Largov to be able to essentially get, you know, grade 2 or greater units back into hand. And then you play this, which is essentially a finder for Magnolia. So essentially playing 6 copies of Magnolia Elder. This is really interesting though. So they played the Fairy as the grade 2. So you essentially Soul Blast it, right? And then you immediately just count loss 1, put into Soul right up to Elder if your opponent's grade 3. Yeah, pretty interesting way to, I guess, include this card. I guess if you're playing in the Ride line, that means that you commit less slots to essentially have this card or have access to this card. And I guess like your grade 2 is like kind of whatever, right? Like you just ride up to grade 1, get a plant token, call it a day. So yeah, that's that. More Varga. This one is very much similar to the initial build, except not running the cycle card and running Bernia instead. I think Bernia is a new addition, and I think it's a pretty welcome addition to Varga as well. Again, another Varga list in the top 16. This one runs 2 cats. But otherwise everything else is kind of normal. And then Luard. So Luard hasn't really changed since it got its new PR. Double Maple, essentially if your board blows up, Maple calls when you stride and you sack the Maple for 2 grade 1s. Angel Ladder for Shiranui matchup. Otherwise, yeah, pretty normal. And then the last one, again, Shiranui again. This one runs 2 of the grade 3 that essentially counts as a discard fodder to draw 1. Otherwise, everything else is pretty normal. Playing this grade 1, essentially if you attack 5 or more times, you combine this unit and essentially null that attack. And then playing one of the Doggo order as well. Yeah, pretty interesting. So that is the top 16 results from the Ultimate Vanguard Cup. Thank you to the tournament organizers for providing this information. It's actually pretty interesting to kind of see how the landscape is at the moment for Divinez Set 1. Very looking forward to, more results coming up. Divinez Set 1, not gonna lie, I've just been like eyeing out everything that goes on social media, because I think, you know, all of the deck builds and people's ideas coming in and out of decks, and, you know, making different decks, altering decks, and it's just a really good time to, I guess, get into Vanguard, play Vanguard. It's just a really good time at the moment, and I'm having a blast with Dive Dolls. Probably gonna, you know, pick up like Rezael next, and I think that Stoic Hair Bug Girl, apparently that's good until, you know, someone solves a really good list. I think it has a lot of potential. So I've heard a lot about that, and I guess maybe just going back to some older decks like Magnolia, because, you know, it's a deck that has shown up, you know, twice now, so must be good, right? So yeah, just gonna look into those as well. If you guys like this video, pop a like, comment down below what you guys think of the results this week. I will be releasing the Shunui comprehensive guide and probably the Lord one in this coming week, because the release is next weekend. So make sure, if you guys haven't already, go to your local game store, hit them up, get that deck set, because I think it is format changing and definitely a must for Springfest. If you guys haven't already, click that subscribe button, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.